Everybody, welcome to this December 16th session of our Kentucky Leads. We appreciate your patience as we tried to get network and connectivity issues worked out. Just a few reminders before we get started. One, Mike Mindful, just make sure you stay muted unless you want us to hear what if you have something to say, then open up your mic. A reminder that this is a recorded session so that you guys can go back and view as needed. A reminder to join from a computer instead of like a phone, because you're going to have much better, you're going to have better connectivity and you're going to have better access to things like the chat and the breakout rooms. Please try to keep your video on as much as possible. Obviously, as we've seen this morning, we know that people do have connectivity issues, so if your video does need to be off, we understand, but please try to have it on as much as possible. Also, make sure that you log in with your district account. Otherwise, we're going to have issues when you try to jump into the chat rooms. And so just try to make sure that you have logged in with your district account. If you haven't done that, feel free to log out now and log back in. And of course, just take breaks as needed. So if you need to step away, just make sure you turn your camera and your mic off. Let us know in the chat you had to step away, just a quick BRB, and that will be just fine. Just a reminder of our norms for our Kentucky Leads meetings. One, to participate with respect, to welcome the multiple viewpoints from your fellow scholars, devote your attention to those speaking and sharing, ask questions for clarification. You guys are such a great group about asking for questions. You can drop those in the chat. So if you have a question for Kathy or for anyone else, make sure that you just drop those in the chat. Or you can raise your hand. Either one is fine. Be courageous and speak your truth, but also own your intentions and your impacts that come with that truth. Most importantly, you just honor our time together. A few reminders about staying connected with each other. We hear this over and over that one of the best things about Kentucky Leads is the connectivity that you guys get to build with each other, that you get to connect with other scholars who have the same heart and the same mind and are working to serve students in Kentucky. So make sure that you use all of these use all of these resources to connect with each other. You can always go back to the meeting link, which lives in the SharePoint site. That link is always there. You can always visit the discussion board. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a sec. There is a directory that has everyone's name, email addresses, that sort of thing on it. So if somebody says something really great and you want to reach out to them later on, you're like, I want to reach out to them personally. Their email is in there, so you could connect with them that way. And of course, we always have our related documents. So anything that's connected to Kentucky Leads, you'll be able to find that in our SharePoint site. In case you missed it, last month we talked about supporting alternate assessment participants. We had Dr. Jackie Kearns from HDI who gave us some really good information and resources and tools about supporting our alt kiddos. There is a link to the session in the Kentucky Leads SharePoint site, so please go back and revisit that as you need to. Our agenda for the day looks something like this. We have a quick check-in and updates. We're going to hear from Kathy today. She's going to talk to us about 2E students or twice exceptional students. We'll have a break. We'll have a breakout room time, and then of course we'll have our evaluation and wrap up. Just a reminder about attendance as well. We know it is the time of year for illness and sickness and flus and all of the things for all of the kids. So if you have to miss or you need to miss for whatever reason, we do understand. Just make sure that you check in on those scholar responsibilities. There's a document that lives in SharePoint, so check in on that. And there is a missed session form. So our only expectation is that, when you're feeling better or when you have that time, you go in, rewatch that session, and then fill out that form and send it to Mike or myself. Either one is fine. A reminder about our discussion board. We have been seeing some really good information come in. Lots of people have been using that. And just a reminder, that is part of the evaluation. So please make sure you check that out. And then also just make sure that, as you hear great events, if you hear of good things that are happening, whether within your region, within your district, great things that you want to share, post those in there. It's a great way for people to hear about that. But also there's some really good questions. There are some fellow scholars who have reached out to you to say, hey, what do you think about this? What are you guys doing about this? Do you have a resource for this? And sometimes you guys have the best knowledge and the best resources. So please make sure you hop in there and help out your fellow scholars by answering some of those questions. And then, Mike, whatever updates or reminders you have for our scholars, I'll go ahead and pass it to you.
Thanks, Shasta. A couple things, if you could note. I see in chat a couple people logged in from their phones, and they're just asking if they can be able to get in the chat room. So I'm not sure if they're going to be able to, but I just wanted to point that out to you, Shasta. First of all, to all of our scholars, for the brand new scholars, congratulations getting through the first semester. That's a big milestone, not an easy task with everything you have on your plate. So congratulations to you. To our more seasoned scholars, congratulations, you're on your home stretch now. I want to encourage you to keep moving forward. The finish line is in sight. Also, to our veteran scholars, I just want to put in a couple things to think about as you're moving into the home stretch. You'll be finished before you know it. Summer's going to be here, and you're going to have a lot of things that you're going to be transitioning into. Looking at positions in your district, possibly new positions outside your district. And what I want to say to you is, once you're in those leadership roles, continue to look at mentoring the younger professionals, younger educators that are moving into these roles that you're in now. As a leader in your school district, it's vital to find and develop these younger educators that really have the potential to be in leadership roles. If it's a director role, wonderful. But if it's an assistant director or behavior consultant or something like that, mentoring and support is vital to moving that leadership chain forward. So I just want to encourage you to think about that as you all are moving into the final stage here and will be exiting the program. Next point is everyone should be registered by now for the spring semester. If you are not, for some reason, you need to do that immediately, because what's going to happen if you register late at your IHE, it's going to change the billing cycle. Your contact at your IHE handles these scholarships, and if you register late, you miss that network to get into, and it really throws the system sideways from a billing standpoint. So you may start getting billed for the coursework, and it just causes a lot of work, extra work for everybody. So if you're not registered for some reason, on Monday, please call your IHE contact for the program and get that taken care of ASAP. So I want to say that. And last but not least, I want to wish everybody a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. It's great to have you all here with this Saturday, and I will send it back to you, Shasta.
Thanks, Mike. Those are really good reminders, especially about that mentoring piece. It is so important. I did try to address a couple of the things in the chat really quickly. If you are joining from a phone, you may have difficulty getting into the chat later. If you have the Teams app, it might be a little smoother, but I'm not 100% sure, so just kind of be aware of that. Before we hop into Kathy's presentation, does anybody have any questions that they want to kind of voice or they didn't have an opportunity to put into the chat? If not, Kathy, are you feeling good to go? You're connected, everything ready?
I think so. I guess we'll just see if I can share my PowerPoint. If not, we can. I'll pass it over to you.
All righty, friends. Well, you are very fortunate today. You get to hear from my good friend, Kathy Anderson. We have worked together at the department for a while. She's also my QB mate. Like, we bug each other all the time. We share snacks all the time. So I'm very happy that you get to hang out with her this Saturday. She is our expert in all things gifted and talented. And aside from being an expert, she's very, very passionate about it. Again, being her QB mate, her neighbor, I get to hear all of the excitement that she has and, all the books that she's reading to continually grow her knowledge and understanding of gifted students. And today she's going to talk to us about supporting twice exceptional or 2E students. So Kathy, I'll let you take over, and if you want to say any other great things about yourself, you can do that. But if you need me to say some more great things, I could go on for at least 10 more minutes. So if not, I'll pass it over to you.
I really appreciate that, Shasta. So let me see if I can share my slides here. Been having some network issues this morning. We'll see how it goes. Oh, there it is. Yay. It's great when your technology works, not so wonderful when it does not. So hopefully I'll be coming up here pretty soon.
I can see it.
I see it, Kathy. Yep.
Woohoo! All right. So like Shasta said, I am the Gifted Education Program Consultant at the Kentucky Department of Education. This is my 12th year at the department. And before coming to the department, I had 16 years in education in the district. 12 of those were at public school and 4 were in private school preschool. So I've done a lot of different things in life. I feel like I'm kind of the jack of all trades and master of none. But I do feel that I know quite a bit about gifted education, and I'm so excited to be here with you today and to talk about twice exceptional or 2E students. So these are our objectives for today. We're going to talk about, what is a 2E student? What are some myths and some profiles? How do educators identify 2E students? And how do educators support 2E students? So first of all, what is a twice exceptional student? So to kind of help us jump into our conversation today, I wanted to do an activity where we're going to use a Google Jamboard. And so I'm going to put the link over into the Jamboard, and then I'll share the Jamboard with you, and we'll talk a little bit more about how the Jamboard works, just in case maybe you're new to Jamboard. So let me just copy that link here. I'll put it over in the chat. Then I'll switch over to the Jamboard. Before I do that, I'll make sure that everybody's okay. Is everybody being able to access the activity? Just a thumbs up maybe if you're good. All righty. So let me stop sharing this and see if I can share a different screen with you guys. All right. So this Jamboard, can everybody see my Jamboard okay? Awesome. Thanks, Karen, for letting me know. What I want you to do is there are 4 different boards here. You'll see one for SLD, then one for EBD, then one for autism, and then for gifted and talented. And so what I want you to do is just take a few minutes and think about the strengths and challenges of each of these categories of exceptional children. And what you do is you just come over here to the left, there's like a little Post-it. And on the Post-it, you can just type, a characteristic of some kind of this category of children. And then you just click Save, and your Post-it note will be up here, and you can move it around underneath. You put your strength here, and then put your challenges over on the other side. And if you would do that for each of these boards, then we'll just think about some things that are, the same, and some of the things that are different about these categories. We'll do some comparison. So I'll give you about, 5 minutes or so. If that seems like that's taking too long, then we'll adjust from there. And just as a reminder, the sticky notes are over here. They're like the 1, 2, 3, the fourth little icon down over here on the left-hand side of your page. And the eraser is the second one here. So when you finish SLD, feel free to move on to BBD, and then autism, ASD, and then gifted and talented. So we got about 40 seconds left. Right, so be kind of wrapping up your ideas. About 5 seconds left. Okay, so thank you so much for participating in this activity. I saw many really good feedback on strengths and challenges of these areas. I'm going to just kind of go through and start with the first board and kind of let you look at those one more time. And as you're looking at them, be thinking about what are some of the similarities of our students with disabilities as to our students with who are gifted and talented, and what are some of the differences. And I'll just kind of flip through these boards here and let you look at those. You guys have done a really great job of looking at the characteristics of all of these students. Okay, I'm going to come back to my presentation. Stop sharing that. Go back to sharing my presentation. Give me just a second. So again, what were your big ideas? You can use the chat, or you can feel free to unmute yourself if you want to. You can use the hands so we don't talk over each other. So what are some similar characteristics across categories? What were some of the similarities you saw between students with disabilities and gifted and talented students? Okay, go ahead and unmute yourself there.
Poor social skills.
Poor social skills. That can be true, yes. Of gifted students as well as students with disabilities. Yes. Any other similarities?
Anxiety and sometimes not challenged enough.
Yes.
Or not, I'm sorry, more likely to, I like the one that says more likely to experience defeat and frustration when they are challenged.
Right, right. And I piggyback on that to say sometimes there may be just confusion maybe about expectations for both groups as well. Yes. The other person with their hand raised there, if I can see
I
who that
didn't
is.
put mine down. I meant to put it down after they said like the ability to rise to challenge is like I taught before I was a special ed teacher. I was a regular education teacher, and that's what I noticed with my GT students was like they would shut down when they were challenged because it's everything had always come easy to them, and the second something didn't come easy to them, they lacked problem solving skills. And so that was what I saw a lot, was just a general lack of problem solving ability. Whereas like my SLD students right now, they have problem solving skills because they've always had to problem solve because nothing's come easy to them. So.
Right, right.
Oh, I was going to add, one of the things that's listed in gifted and talented is just talents can be demonstrated in different domains. And I think what he's getting at too with the creativity and collaboration, and it's not specifically or explicitly stated under strengths of each of the disability categories, but that's true about all of those disability categories, is whatever their strengths are usually demonstrated in maybe in some other way than we might traditionally think of it through, demonstrating academic skills or social skills or those types of things.
That's true. Just because you've been identified for services for gifted and talented in the area of, say, music or art, doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be gifted and talented cognitively, or have a particular passion for math or whatever. And I think that is sometimes a myth, that if you're gifted in all things. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Any other thoughts or comments about similarities? Okay. All right. Good job. All right. I'm going to move on then. Thank you so much for your thoughtfulness and your input. So there is not a national definition for twice exceptional. I've looked and did some research on this, but this is one definition that I found, is that one definition of twice exceptional children includes children who are identified as gifted but demonstrate evidence of one or more disabilities. So that's why we sometimes call students who are have a disability but also could be gifted or are identified as gifted twice exceptional. Sometimes if you throw an English language learner characteristics in there, they can be thrice exceptional or multi-exceptional.
Can
So
you all pull the dogs out?
So there are several different categories of gifted children. There is general intellectual ability. These are students who have high cognitive ability. Sometimes they like to, they know a lot about maybe a particular subject. I know I had a kindergarten who was just terribly interested in the Titanic, and it was all things Titanic for a year. And then he moved on to something else. These aren't children that are necessarily gifted in math necessarily or reading, but they do think logically. They're linear thinkers, good problem solvers, critical thinkers. The next category is specific academic aptitude. So in Kentucky, we look at students who are passionate about math, science, social studies, and language arts. These students generally know a lot about that subject without having been taught that maybe in class, just because of their passion or for a particular subject. Sometimes they know so much about the subject that sometimes people get tired of hearing them talk about the subject or raise their hands to share about things. Creativity is sometimes people think that these are people who are good at drawing or that type of thing. That's not necessarily so. Children who are identified for creativity are what we call divergent thinkers. So they come up with many answers to a problem. Like, for example, you could give a child who's a creative thinker a pen, a paper clip, and say, now what kind of things could you do with this paper clip? And in under a minute, they can come up with probably 50 things you could do with that paper clip. They can think they're really good problem solvers. Sometimes they don't always read the directions to things. I'm thinking of people in my family, namely my husband. He's a very creative thinker. He does not read the directions, you guys. He looks at something, he goes, I think this is the way it works. And generally, he can put things together or make things work. He's a big problem solver. If there's a problem, how can I fix it? They have lots of different ways of coming up with ways to fix things. Leadership is one of those categories I think people sometimes maybe don't understand quite as well as we would hope they would. I hear people say that, a gifted student should be a leader in all areas. They should just lead. Sometimes gifted children don't want to lead. They like to be over at the side doing their own thing, working on their own thing. Sometimes, as y'all have alluded to, they're not always the best communicators or people who get along. But, a leader is somebody who can get people to do things in a group that maybe they wouldn't. A leader is someone who the other kids will look to help them solve problems or they talk to. They're good at getting people to organize things. Even from a small age, you may have a little one who is able to help everybody line up. It's like you need to be here and you need to be there. Those are some characteristics of a leader. Visual performing arts in our state, we have music, we have drama, we have dance, and did I say visual art, dance, drama, and music? Yes. And so these students have different characteristics for the different categories. A child in music, I was gifted in music, and I find myself humming sometimes when it's silent. I kind of do that, or I think in musical terms. Like if somebody says something, a lyric or a song title comes into my head, and I can't help myself. And usually I try to kind of mute that because I know that can bother people. So I just kind of try to keep that on the down low. Children who are gifted in dance, their bodies naturally want to move to the music. They find pleasure in that. children who are gifted in the arts, you'll probably see them doodle. They like to draw usually, and if there's a chance for them to do a product to show you what they've learned, they usually like to do that in an artistic way. My father is very artistic. He seems to have times of feast and famine. Like he's decided he's going to paint pictures for everybody for Christmas. He's done 13 pictures here in the past month, and he just enjoys it, loves it. You know, he finds peace and tranquility, and just very passionate about that. And then we have children in drama. Children in drama, they usually are very, they speak well. When you listen, they're good storytellers, that their facial expressions and the way that they do the different voices, it just comes very naturally to them. And so these are the different areas of gifted, the gifted categories. And I thought I would just talk about those for a couple of minutes because I know you're very familiar with the next slide. Will be the categories of disability. And so there have been lots of different categories of disability. And it's just important to know that students with a disability can also be gifted. And I think we just need to remember that it's not always a cognitive or a specialty or passion in the academics, but it can be creativity, leadership, and the visual and performing arts. Let's not forget about those as we think about children who could be twice exceptional. So just wondered if you knew that the following people were probably 2E, and thinking about their achievements and what were their contributions. I can't get my thing to move. It's like stuck. That's weird. Any suggestions about what to do to make it move forward? No.
I can see your little like black mouse moving across the screen. It's almost like
Yeah.
they're not in sync. What if you just hit your forward button on your keypad?
On my
Does that work?
keypad. Nope. That's
Nope.
not moving either.
Or on the bottom.
so
where it
sorry, you
says line
guys.
of 38, if you move the arrow.
Nope, that doesn't work. Maybe if I turn my camera off, there'll be more network capability. Maybe that's something to do with it.
That's a good idea.
Nope. Maybe if I unshare and share again, maybe that'll help. I'll give that a try.
Yep.
While Kathy's getting her mouse worked out, when she was talking about the humming and the singing, she was not joking. There are so many times that I'll make a comment or statement and there will be this song that follows it, or there's times that we're taking little breaks and she just bursts out into song, and it's like one of my most favorite things is that she has a song for it, and she's, you know, always got a tune for it. So it's always nice to have that.
I
Hey,
appreciate
Shasta.
that you think it's nice. I
Shasta.
cannot
Kathy
shine.
won't be able to get hers going. Maybe you can share your PowerPoint.
Maybe you can share it. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, you
I can
guys.
just
I'm
do
just
that.
having network issues today.
Then Kathy, you
No
can just tell her
worries.
when to move forward to the next slide.
Yeah.
No worries, I got it.
There we go.
All right, Kathy, I'm right where you were.
I can't see it.
Oh no, are you serious?
Yeah.
Kathy, we're on slide 9. If you just bring up your PowerPoint
Mhm.
just off your computer there, and you just look at slide 9 on your computer. and
Okay.
then We'll just go there.
That's a good idea. Okay.
Then we'll have to worry about any network connectivity or anything like that.
Okay.
And you can just tell me, Kathy, just say next slide and I'll scoot ahead in pace with
Okay.
you.
All right. So we're on the slide 10, Shasta, if you would show that
Okay.
one.
Perfect. That's
So
where we are.
these are, yes. So these are some famous twice exceptional people. So I'm sure that you recognize some of these people. We've got Temple Grandin, and Stephen Hawking, Robin Williams, and James Earl Jones. And one of my favorite stories is from James Earl Jones. So James Earl Jones had a speech impediment, and when he got to high school, he had a drama teacher who took special interest in him, and he began to memorize different things and monologues and everything, and that really helped his speech impediment. Next slide. So next we're going to talk a little bit about the gifted regulations and some exceptions and special considerations to the gifted regulations. Next slide, if you would, Shasta. Is this working for you guys? Can y'all see the slides and stuff?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, great. Okay. So the first gifted regulation I want to go over with you is from Section 3. And this talks about that districts have to provide a system for screening and identification, which provide equal access for racial and minority children, disadvantaged children, and children with disabilities. And so therefore, you know, students with disabilities, districts have got to review their accommodations in their student individual education program, their IEP, and these accommodations must be provided when assessing students for gifted education. The district staff should review student data and behavioral characteristics of students with disabilities and be looking to see if there are any students who should be considered for the gifted program. So this is one of the things that I really want to talk about, is that there has to be equity for our students with disabilities in our gifted programs. And I still have people who will either email or they'll call me and we'll talk about, you know, do we provide their accommodations? And the answer to that is yes. When they're being assessed, either for, you know, either a state assessment or a district assessment, those IEP accommodations need to be provided to those students. The next regulation I want to talk about is these exceptions and special considerations for eligibility. So as you can see on the screen here, this comes from Section 4, subsection 2 of the gifted regulation. And this is talking about that school personnel, you know, staff in the districts, as they are considering students for the gifted program, they've got to be thinking about, are there any environmental, are there cultural, are there any disabling conditions which might be masking that child's abilities, which might be excluding them from being considered for the gifted program. And the subsection lists 3 underrepresented populations here, and that would be our students with disabilities as defined in KRS 157.200, disadvantaged children, so these could be children who are either economically or culturally disadvantaged, and our underachieving students. So these are students who could be performing at high levels, but for one reason or another are not meeting those expectations of themselves or what they could be doing. Then another thing that's really important to know is that the gifted education program has a GT selection and placement committee, and they are similar to an ARC in several ways. And this is the committee that, when all the evidence has been gathered by the GT staff, they assemble and they look at the evidence to see if the evidence meets the criteria of the gifted regulation, those 5 different categories that I talked about before. And for students with disabilities, if you have a child that for one reason or another, you've gathered up all the information and they don't meet a particular criteria there, the Gifted and Talented Placement Committee can discuss whether or not special considerations should be used for the student. That's been my experience, that when you have a student with a disability, often they may need some accommodations for doing different things, activities and whatnot, but their gift is not usually, it usually will stand out, but we'll talk about this some more in a little bit, but they don't necessarily usually need an accommodation for their gift. If they sing, their talent really stands out. If they're a creative person, it stands out. If they have high cognitive function, that usually stands out too. what usually is an issue is that their disability sometimes is masking, or it gets more attention than their gifts and talents. And we'll talk about that some more in just a little bit. Then you may be saying to yourself, well, who should be on this gifted selection and placement committee? So I think this is talked about here on the slide before. So let me just go back to slide 14 there, Shasta, sorry. So on this gifted and talented placement committee, it's made up of the gifted education teacher or the coordinator, representatives from classroom teachers, and so on and so forth, and anyone who knows that child. So if you are the special education teacher or the director of special education person in your district, you could be invited to be on that committee. And because many times they are the ones who know those special education students the best. Next slide, if you would, Shasta, 15. And so, like I said before, the purpose of this committee is to determine if the students meet the criteria. All right. So I'm just going to stop right there for a second and see if anybody's got any questions or comments. Y'all are very quiet.
A number of the students that I've worked with that have behavior disabilities, most of them, they qualified for gifted programs, but the behaviors hindered them from participating. So the challenge was to make sure that they had access. It was kind of like if they had access to the gifted program, it might have alleviated some of their behaviors. I don't, that was difficult for me to navigate through.
So what I heard you say was that you've known students who had challenging behaviors or were EBD students and also identified as gifted, but they weren't allowed to do some of the gifted activities because of their behavior. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct. Like most of the time, so what would happen is their behaviors manifested first, like you would notice their behaviors first, and they would be identified, and that's what we would, the eligibility or all of the evaluation process, through the evaluation process to try to identify their behaviors, it would show that their IQ was through the roof and they really qualified in other certain areas that you showed earlier, that they were gifted. And I think that some of their behaviors were actually manifested because they weren't being challenged through their gifted I guess that's what I'm saying. So that was difficult as a special education teacher to help them navigate through being twice exceptional, because it was generally they were EBD, or like we focused on their behavior first, and but then trying to get them to participate in the program that was designed in our district, the way they set up their gifted program, it also challenged them because their social skills and different behaviors, they couldn't participate as much. But yeah.
I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a really good thing to talk about. And I think that's not something that we know a whole lot about in gifted education, unfortunately. And I think that's where there definitely needs to be that collaboration between our special ed teachers and our gifted teachers. Because if the student's been identified, say for drama or for music, we want those children to participate in those activities. Let's say that they audition and they, are accepted for like the Kentucky music organization or whatever. And we wouldn't want those behaviors to keep them from participating, because that could be a really growth time for that student in their identification. But at the same time, we all know that there are norms that have to be followed when you go for a rehearsal, right? But I think, there has to be that collaboration piece of some strategies to help that student self-advocate and be able to use those strategies they have to participate in everyday life. That's the goal, right? Is for our SPED students to be able to use the strategies they have in order to progress, to grow, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that's one of the things that I kind of ran into as a gifted education teacher is I would have people say, well, you have to be a good child in order to be in the special education program. And there is nothing in the regulation that talks about you have to be good, behaviorally good. And I think that's one of those myths we're going to talk about in a second. And I really appreciate you bringing that up. Is there any other comments or thoughts? Okay. All right. Let me see. Where are we
Kathy, I
at
was
here,
gonna
Shasta?
say, so it's like
Yeah.
10:48. Is this a good space to go, like a natural space to go ahead and take a break?
I think it is. I think it is.
Okay, how about, so it's 10:48. Let's just do like, let's just everybody be back at 11. We'll give you a little bit actually, let's say 10:49. Actually, let's do 10:55. Okay, everybody be back at 10:55.
Hey. Just so
Hello.
sorry for all the technical issues this morning.
It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries.
Glenn suggested if people turned off their cameras that there wouldn't be all that bandwidth being used, and I might be able to share my PowerPoint, but if you want to just continue on the way we're doing, that's fine too.
What are you more comfortable with?
I'm fine the way we are, you know. And if you like to be able to see people's faces and, you know, it helps people participate, that's fine too, you know.
We can definitely give it a try. I can ask friends to turn their cameras off and we'll see if it helps you.
Yeah.
And then we'll just
I
ask that they
didn't-
turn it back on when they speak.
Yeah. I just didn't even think about not having the bandwidth that I normally have, you know. And I'm glad to see there's 30 people today. That's really great. I hope this is helpful for people.
Oh.
I'm just sorry that struggling with my technology today. So.
Hey, Carrie.
Hi. This is a near and dear topic for me.
Great.
Most of the children that I worked with who had EBD, I would say their IQs were through the roof and they were so smart. And I just don't think that the way they were learning and presented information was right on with them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But then it's difficult. But I'll turn my camera off because I heard that. So
I apologize. Anyway, so.
Friends, as you log back on in order to try to help Kathy's bandwidth, I guess everybody in her neighborhood is watching Saturday morning cartoons or something on Netflix. So if you could you please go ahead and just leave your camera off unless you're speaking. If you start speaking, we'd love to see your beautiful, wonderful faces. So could you turn it back on when you speak, but otherwise just turn it off. Let's see if that helps Kathy this morning. And Kathy, it's 10:55, so you can start back whenever you're ready.
Okay. Can you see my screen about gifted students?
We can.
Oh, great. Okay, cool. I can see the screen as well. I can't see my notes. I'm not exactly sure if there's a way to do that or not. But anyway, I won't worry about that. Well, thanks, friends, for coming back and not leaving me. Really appreciate your patience with the technology issues I'm having this morning. Like Shasta said, I think everybody must be watching Netflix or something on their televisions this morning out here in beautiful Shelby County where I live. So anyway, so thanks so much for your input and your passion about special ed students and their gifts as well. Just going to talk a few minutes about the myths about gifted students. I've kind of talked a little bit about that in some of our previous slides. So one of the myths about gifted students is that gifted students must be good at everything. That's something I battled when I was in the GT resource teacher is, you know, this child's been identified as gifted. So they need to make really high scores on all the state assessments and be doing well in class. And the truth of the matter is that they're not always good in everything. They may be good at music, they might be good at art, but they may not necessarily be good, or they may struggle and need some supports in math or science or reading, those types of things. And kind of going back to the gentleman who talked about, you know, gifted students who shut down, I think, you know, that's something that we continually need to keep talking about with the gifted and talented students, is that it's not a label. It's a service. We're offering a service just like you guys are offering services to your ECE students. And we need to have conversations with our gifted students about, you know, you've been identified for services in art or in reading. It doesn't mean that you're going to be good at everything and that you may struggle, you know, even if you are gifted in this area over here. I think it's really important to communicate with our students to help them, to support them. Myth 2, we've talked about this some too, is that gifted students are always going to be mature, self-directed, and well-behaved. I mean, no one is always mature, even as a grown-up person, self-directed and well-behaved. But again, I think this goes back to gifted and talented being a label rather than we focusing on the services, and then it is our responsibility as
Shasta, she may have locked up.
Yep, I think she's frozen. Let me send her a quick text.
Yeah, just take over the slides again and have her walk through like we're doing.
Yep. Let me text her first, let her know we've lost her.
just.
There's that.
Sorry about
Oh, there
that.
you are.
Can y'all hear me? Okay.
We can.
Okay. I'm
Let
gonna
me
let
try
you
taking
share
over
again.
this.
Yeah,
so I was
you just
gonna
take
say, let
over
me do
again.
that.
And if everybody will just turn off their camera for right now, that would be helpful, I think. I just don't have good connection out here in the county where I live today.
I'm on myth 2, Kathy. So if you want to start from there and then just tell me when to move forward.
Okay. So again, we were talking about gifted students always being mature and self-directed and well-behaved. Like we said before, we were talking about the comment about the student who wasn't being allowed to do their gifted and talented activity or have those supports, those enrichments because of their behavior. And we need to try to mitigate that by offering strategies, to help those students with their behavior, which I know you guys are doing. So that they can also be provided those services for their gifts and talents. The third myth is that gifted students don't need any extra help. They are smart enough to figure it out themselves. And I think this is a really big issue in that, students feel this way about themselves. They're like, well, I've been identified as gifted and talented. I can't reach out for help. I ought to be able to do this myself. Or like we talked about before, they just shut down. Sometimes, gifted students will procrastinate because they don't have the strategies they need to chunk things out, to look at the calendar and say, well, I need to do this by this date. I need to have done this by this date. They need assistance. It's not that they're just going to be little perfect human beings. They're children who have been identified in an area or areas, but they still need supports to be to grow, to be successful. All right, next slide, Chester. We're going to talk about the profiles of possible 2E students. All right, so there are 3 different profiles of 2E students I want to talk about. The first profile, next slide there, is the Just Try Harder profile. So these are students who've been identified as gifted, but they have an undetected learning disability. And so sometimes they have a large vocabulary. Sometimes they can talk you out of things or take over the class with their verbal precociousness. Their handwriting and spelling sometimes don't match their verbal ability. I know I had a twice exceptional student who was very creative, a really, really great storyteller, but he really had difficulty putting his thoughts and words down on paper because his ability to write and that type of thing. And so we tried different strategies, like using some sort of a word processing device and that type of thing. They're on grade level. And so, it could be causing their disability to be overlooked. And identification of their disabilities, could offer some help for the things that they're struggling with. Like I said before, they're really bright, but they don't get their work in on time because they don't know how to their time management is not very good, or they may struggle because of being maybe a attention deficit. They have a hard time focusing from one thing to another, those types of things. All right, next slide, Shasta. The next slide is the just average profile. This is what I call where, you know, the disability and the gifted ability, they kind of wash each other out. And so the student's neither, you know, gifted nor is the student detected or identified for disability. And so they have, you know, a lot of intelligence, and it you know, compensates for their learning disability. They begin to have, you know, general classroom instruction, but there aren't any red flags because they're getting their work done. They've got average grades, but at the same time, they're functioning below their potential. You know, if they had some supports in place or had been identified for gifted as well, there would be supports in place for both of those areas for the child. And this is where you've got your abilities that are masking their disability and vice versa. And it's been in my experience, just through personal family things that have happened in my life, is that as children get older, their gifts and talents at some point cannot compensate for what's going on in the classroom. And so that's the second profile. All right, third profile, if you would, Shasta, the next slide. And the third profile is just the can't be gifted profile. So these are students who've been identified with a disability, but their exceptional abilities are unrecognized or unidentified. And I think this especially goes to our EBD friends who have emotional behaviors that just, for some reason, there's that myth out there that gifted students have to be good students, that they're have to be well behaved, they have to have everything under control, they should be mature, they should be leaders. But the fact of the matter is that these students, without having their gifts and abilities recognized, may fail in school because of their disability and not their talents. You know, little attention is being given to their strengths, and there's just not that positive notice of what they could be doing. And, you know, over time, like one of our friends were saying just a little bit ago, that negative outlook can lead to more disruptive behaviors because they're just not engaged in the classroom. So that's profile number 3. If you go on to the next slide, if you would, Shasta. So here are some of the strengths and challenges of our 2E friends. I won't read all these to you. I'm sure that you are probably thinking of students in your schools or your districts that you've known that you're saying to yourself, I wonder if that child could have been twice exceptional. They have a superior vocabulary, but they're easily frustrated. They're curious and imaginative, but sometimes have big opinions about things, and that can look as being not very nice or being argumentative rather than being imaginative or being taking charge of things. They often have a wide range of interest, but because of their wide range of interest, sometimes they lack organization and study skills. And then, like many of you said before, you know, students with disabilities and students with gifts and talents often have difficulty with social interactions. So I just want to stop and pause just for a second and just see if any of you have any comments or thoughts you'd like to share about these myths and these profiles. I know I've thought to myself, if I went back in the classroom today, I would be a much better teacher, a much better advocate for students with disabilities and for students with gifts and talents. I would definitely be advocating for my friends who had students with disabilities, but I saw that we're good artists, we're good singers. If I knew what I knew now, I'd be a better educator.
How do they, for students who have disabilities and like maybe a parent referred them for gifted and talented, I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, how do they assess them, and like for those particular areas? And I guess I'm concerned about the teachers or the guidance counselors or admin having a misconception because the child does have a disability, and they might look at it and say, hey, the student's not, distinguished in certain areas on the KSA, or they're not, extremely above average in one particular area in the math scores or things like that.
Right.
How does that?
Right. You can't see me, but my head is nodding up and down. I'm afraid if I turn my camera on, I'll lose you guys again, and I don't want to do that. So, first of all, anyone can refer a child to be identified or to be assessed, to be evaluated for the Gifted and Talented program. Just reach out to the GT teacher or the Gifted and Talented coordinator in your district and ask for their referral process. Sometimes those referral forms are online. Sometimes they're paper pencil, but that's where I would start. And start with the GT teacher in your building or your district and ask them, say, hey, I think that I know of a child who is exhibiting these creative behaviors or really has a passion for social studies, etc. And they will be able to help you with that referral process. Just like for students with disabilities, there are different ways that students are identified for those categories, and it's the same for gifted and talented. For a child in the visual and performing arts, if you've got a child who maybe you're going to refer for the art, visual art part, there may be that they may want to collect some artwork of that student. They may also have maybe an on-demand project that the student does. They may have some judges who look at that work and have a rubric that they're using. So it's just it's different for the different districts, but as you look at the gifted regulations, it talks about how those students can be identified. But again, students with disabilities, if there's something that the GT committee thinks that is masking that student's ability, they need to have those conversations about the student and what might be masking it. It's been my experience that when you've got a gifted child in art or music, or a gifted child in math or whatever, that there may be some strategies that need to be made to accommodate those child's gifts and talents, but they usually shine. They shine pretty bright. What seems to hold them back usually is that EBD part, is if they have some behavior issues, and that's something that's that wall we really need to walk to knock down, is about behavior. Did that help answer your question?
Yes, and that was part of it too. Is I was concerned about other health impairment, specifically for ADHD students, because even though they don't have a behavior disorder, they do display certain behavior challenges and attention challenges, hyperactivity, and that was my couple students I'm thinking about. That was what I was concerned with. That they think that, yeah, I think you're understanding what
definitely. But Alex, just reach out to your GT teacher and talk with them about that, and y'all can work together if that child is identified to support that child on both ends of the spectrum for that child.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? That's a good question. Gifted and talented is just like Child Find. We're always looking for students, continually seeking.
And I think I already talked about this a little bit earlier. I think that a lot of the students who have been identified with an EBD, like who have been identified as EBD, a lot of that stems from not being challenged as much in the regular classroom. And then, but when you identify them based on the criteria that they are exceptional, as far as they are gifted, and whether it's their IQ or whether the different other criteria in different in different areas, I think they have behavior disabilities or behavior concerns in the classrooms, but if they were able to go to a program where they are challenged or think differently, and their activities were differentiated in a different way, then that's what happens. And I think that that's what's confusing about it. And I realized that when I was working the last couple years I was in the classroom, I've found that many of my EBD students were so gifted, but they weren't being challenged in the classroom, or their work wasn't differentiated enough, or it didn't meet their learning styles. Because when you're gifted, your learning style, I mean, identifying your learning style, it's different. So
It is.
I don't know. I just think that that's one of the biggest, they might not have even had that EBD label had they been identified as gifted first, and then would have been able to work through things a different way. I don't know.
I agree. And I think, having a spotlight on um, your gifts and talents could also, change the trajectory of a student's life if you think about it. Yes, I'm struggling over here, but that doesn't mean that I don't have, things to offer, things that I'm good at, that type of thing. But I think often we've got that profile of the student with a disability, and there's so much focus on offering that student services to support them with their disability that we overlook those gifts and talents. And I really hope that you guys are listening today, that as you go out in your districts, after we get back from winter break, you start looking for those kids who've got those gifts and talents, but are your exceptional children, and having those conversations with your staff about they don't have to be necessarily behaviorally good students. And I know that our students with EBD have been identified for that, they are struggling, right? But we can't keep those struggles or those needs from keeping them from being identified for their gifts and talents. I think that's my one big message today, is just to be thinking about that, is that these students shouldn't be overlooked, passed over. Okay, so Shasta, I guess back to our presentation here. Really appreciate everybody's thoughts and feedback. Really appreciate it. So we're on slide 25, and this is going to be about the identification process. We've touched on this a little bit. So next slide, Shasta. So it's really important that for there to be equity in our programs for our students with disabilities, that all students be screened on at least one grade level. So formal identification begins in 4th grade, but we also have that primary talent pool. And so it's really important for us to be looking at our younger students, K through 3, who are in primary talent pool for those gifts and talents, even though they may have a disability, for us to be front loading and giving them opportunities to show where they can shine, so that we can formally identify them later when they get to be in 4th grade. And so their best practice is that at least on one grade level, let's say 4th grade, because that's where the gifted and talented program formally begins, that all students be screened. Because if we're just referring them through parents or teachers, there are going to be children who are missed for one reason or another. And then we want to choose assessments which don't create barriers when we're screening them. So there are assessments out there that are nonverbal assessments. So if a child has, maybe difficulty reading or comprehending, needs help with that there are, nonverbal assessments that can be given that give us verbal as well as nonverbal scores. Again, I just can't say this often enough, is if we're giving a screening or an assessment of some kind, those accommodations that are listed on the student plans, those have to be provided. That is state regulation. And then we also want to just not look at one data point. We want to look at the whole child. We want to have multiple evidence for that child. The assessment score or whatever is just one data point. We want to collect portfolios of work. We want to look at informal assessments in the classroom. We want to have auditions. We want to look at artwork if that's, what's being considered for that child. So we want to look at all different types of evidence for that child, not just that one data point. Because I don't know about you, but there have been days that I wouldn't have done well on an assessment. And so it's good to be looking at everything about that child, not just that one data point in time. Next slide, Shasta. I can get myself to go there. GT formal identification. So again, I think I've already said some of this before. When you get to the formal assessment part, accommodations need to be provided. Also, we need to be looking for discrepancies on assessments through subtests. So let's say you give the WISC or the Woodcock-Johnson for a student, and they do really well on the verbal part, but maybe their processing speed is really much lower. Those discrepancies might indicate, a really bright student. So it's really good to look at those types of things with our, when our counselors looking at assessments and special ed teachers. Again, to provide, nonverbal assessments, which give, like the Naglieri, it's called the INNAT. That's one I can think of that has, it's a nonverbal assessment, but verbal and nonverbal scores are given the way the test is managed. And then also, it's just really important if you've got, a music or a drama student, to give them those chances to practice what they know. I know when I was in high school, I had sung all my life, but I never had any auditioning practice before. And so it was really important for someone to reach out to me and say, well, this is how you go about doing it. These are some things you need to know. We've got to support our students so that they feel successful when they go and audition for different things. And then it's just really important that we all know and we train and communicate with our staff and our GT selection and placement committee, talking about those special considerations. I know oftentimes when I go to monitor for state consolidated monitoring, well, I'll bring up special considerations, and people just have no idea what I'm talking about. They think that you have to meet all the criteria there, and that there are no exceptions to the rules, so to speak. So I think it's really important that people understand those types of things. Right. So the next slide there, if you would, Shasta. So what would be the ramifications of overlooking, students that are have a disability but could possibly be gifted? What are some of the things that might happen in the future for those students? And if you would, you can just either, unmute yourself or put over in the chat what you think about that. If a student's not identified either for their disability or for their gifts or for both. Failure, achievement gaps, increased behavioral challenges, yes. And someone also said in the chat about their middle child being a 2E profile kiddo who was identified as GT first, and we struggled to get him identified as right for his OCD, perfectionism and contamination manifestation because of his grades were above average. Yeah, we talked about that in one of the profiles, didn't we? Low self-esteem, anxiety. Good. Here's some other things to think about. If you would, go ahead and click the slide again, Shasta, and it should come up on the screen there. Some just bulleted things to think about. Students who aren't identified in the early years may be less likely to be identified later, especially for gifted and talented. Usually there's only one person or maybe two people in the district, and it's a very a heavy lift for assessment and evaluation. And sometimes there's, somebody brought this up, I saw on one of the stickers, that the funding for GT is maybe not as much as it is for some of the other programs. And so time and funds and whatnot are limiting to being identified at a later date. Then we talked about, future educational plans could be compromised. If a student gives up because they just are struggling and their gifts and talents aren't recognized, maybe they give up and they just don't graduate. They could be less likely to receive testing accommodations as a student with a disability. And then colleges, I didn't realize this, and maybe I'm not sure if this is still true or not. I think so. Require an assessment within 3 years of entrance. So if you've got a student who hasn't been identified for a disability and they go into college and they need those supports in place to help them be successful. If they haven't been identified with a disability, then they won't have those supports in college as well. So those are just some of the things that could happen from, overlooking our 2E students. I saw some things pop up in the chat there. Yes. So loss of potential, right? Students falling through the cracks. And then another person said yes to all of this, the funding issue as well. And we did receive some funding back in 2022. Gifted funding had been from the General Assembly at about 6.2 million. And in 2022, it was increased to 10 million. And so when we had that increase, we at the state looked at our calculation funding and wanted to make it more equitable. So there has been an increase in funding up to 10 million. But when you divide that among 172 districts and the Kentucky School for the Deaf and the Kentucky School for the Blind, you can see that more funding is still needed to have those staffs and those supports for students in place. All right, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint Shasta, and I'm on slide 29, talking about how we can support 2E students. All right, so once we're identified and we've got a 2E student, then what can we do? So here's 4 different key elements that I think are really important. A nurturing environment. We need to have the staff and we need to have people in our districts who are going to encourage that development of that student for their, their struggles as well as for their talents. We need to be offering, learning strategies to help them meet their needs and thinking about what can we do to help them, with their, like I said before, their struggles and also with their gifts and talents. There needs to be social, emotional support. I think that's really key for all of our students in our districts these days, from what from my conversations with people from the district, to help them understand that they don't have to be gifted in everything, that they won't be gifted in everything. And even if they are gifted, they're still going to struggle. And that's important for them to understand. And then also to provide challenging learning opportunities in their zone of proximal development, wherever that child is, to have strategies that are appropriate for where they're developing. I think those are all really important key elements. Next slide, if you would, Shasta. So I know many of you know about the 3 main components of differentiation, which is content, process, and product. And so how does this look for students who are 2E? They're going to be really good at some things and they're going to struggle at other things. So what are some things to think about when we're providing differentiation for our 2E students? Next slide, if you would, Shasta. So when we talk about differentiating content for our 2E students, so we want to build on their strengths, but we also need to provide supports for their needs. So, when we're talking about the strengths, we want to pre-test and find out what a student knows. That's so important for our gifted and talented children. They do not like drill and kill. That's one of the quickest ways to squash a child's passion is through drill, especially if you've got someone who's gifted in a certain subject or area. That's really hard on them. We want to guide those students to make those interest-based learning choices. You're interested in a certain thing, so what are some choices for you? And then also to explore that content that they're interested in into greater depth, that deeper learning piece. But what do we need on the other side to support the student who's 2E? So they are going to need to have access in different ways to research the information. And they're also going to maybe need, multiple print or supplemental text resources to help them with their reading levels. If we've got a visual impaired child, they may need, as devices to help them see the content. If you've got a child who is deaf and hard of hearing, they may need some supports if they're an artistic student for how to do different things, and someone that understands art that can translate that for them as they look at different media, that kind of thing. Next slide, if you will, Shasta. So how about differentiating that process about how they're going to take that content and learn more about that content? So we want the students to be self-reliant learners, to be advocates for themselves. We want those tasks that they're doing to learn about the content to be on their level and their interest. Gifted children are just like students with disabilities. They come on a continuum from students who are gifted to students who are highly gifted. And we want to encourage creativity and the skills that they already have, those talents that they have. But on the other side, adaptations need to happen. We need to encourage them to make sense of an idea in their preferred way of learning. So if they prefer to draw or to sing or to make puzzles and games, we need to encourage that. But on the same, token, we may have children who don't know how to manage their time, to manage projects. And so we need to help them with those strategies to do that. And then we also need to teach investigation and research skills. How do you go about looking into something so that you're taking that deeper dive into whatever it is that you're interested in, whatever you're gifted in. Next slide, Shasta. Then lastly, differentiating that product. So we want to build again on those strengths of having, we want to promote that critical thinking and expanding about those key concepts. We want to use products that connect to the real world. That's really important. Why am I doing this? What is the purpose of it? Will I ever use algebra in the real world again? That was one of the things I thought of as a music student. Why do I need to take algebra? I'm not going to use this when I become a music teacher or whatever. And if somebody explained to me how important math was in music, I probably would have listened a whole lot better looking back. And then we want to encourage that self-evaluation based upon agreed criteria. Gifted students can be some of the most critical children of themselves and others. And so it's really important that we have those positive self-talking skills for those children. I know myself and my own children, I never needed for my mom and dad to criticize me. I criticized myself enough in music that I didn't need that. I really needed some positive self-talk as I look back. And then again, adaptation for those needs. We want to support the student with the materials and technologies that we have to increase their productivity. We want them, again, to help them break down those things in manageable steps. I know for myself and other gifted learners I've known, I would put things off because I was afraid they wouldn't be perfect enough. And I would wait till the last minute to get started on things. And by then it was much too late to get started and to learn things. So it's really important to help those children break down the task in a way that will help them. For example, I went to a contest one time at Northern Kentucky University when I was in college. I'll never forget this. And I had put off learning the song that was in Italian. And I got up there to do my audition, and the lyrics just flew out my brain because I really hadn't studied and taken the time to learn the lyrics. And I just started singing all kinds of Italian words. It was really embarrassing when I look back. So it's so important to help children, strategize and break down the material. And then also, again, just authentic products. Why am I doing this? Why is it important? Sometimes it's good for them to come up with the product and the problem to help them see that it can be a real world connection. So any thoughts about that? I'm going to stop. I feel like I've talked a whole lot there, Shasta. Any thoughts or comments? Really appreciate y'all's feedback and listening today.
I'll just kind of say too, even as you were talking here, Kathy, and talking about differentiation strategies, and we have lots of scholars here who have kiddos who are, gifted or 2E or, somewhere on that continuum. And I just got to thinking about, wow, these are some really good parenting strategies too, because I think about my own kiddo with his ADHD and his executive functioning and his I'm just not going to do it until it's an emergency. And then it's an emergency and all of that. So these, I think these are helpful whether you're a parent or a teacher, with a kiddo who has some of these characteristics.
I appreciate you saying that, Shasta, because it is really important that we support our children either as parents or educators.
I was
Okay.
appreciating that as well, Chasta. And I also wanted to say that this information is very helpful to me as a parent and in my current role. And I like that you broke down different ways to support them. A lot of the information that you've been providing, I have been making connections with, um, and I'm ready to share. So I really appreciate this.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I hope the information is helpful. And like I said, I hope when you go back after winter break that maybe you look at some of the students in your buildings a little differently. I really hope that. That's my hope. Any other comments? All right. Shasta, will go on up to slide 35, best practices for collaboration. So, that old saying that talks about, it takes a village to raise a child. That's so true. When we've got our twice exceptional children, those children need time for those services for their disability, but they also need time for the services for their gifts and talents. I think that's one of the things I hear most often from the field is, how am I going to find time? How are we going to schedule time for these children to have those services that they need on both ends? And one of the things that, it's important I would like for people to know is that we need more people in the classroom who understand our gifted children, because, gifted children and students with disabilities, they need those supports 24/7, not a 30-minute pullout once a week, right? And so I think it's really important that we work together to provide those services for our children, whether they're pullout services or whether or not we push in or whether or not we differentiate that instruction in the regular classroom. Just so important. I know, in my pre-service days, I'm thinking about what I learned for SPED and what I learned for GT. I think they took, maybe one day in the classroom to cover special ed and gifted. I think gifted maybe got 30 minutes. And I think we really need to work on that on the pre-service end, giving those teachers the skills they need to understand and how to support gifted students in the regular classroom. And then, the coordinator, the GT coordinator could be invited to the special education ARC. I mean, one of the regulations says that anyone can be invited who could provide, information about that child during the ARC meeting. So that's something to think about too. And then on the opposite hand, special education teachers need to be invited to the GT Selection Placement Committee meetings. These are the staff who know our children the best. And this is the way we support our programs, is that we collaborate and we help each other. Next slide, Shasta. So here's some resources. I'm here at the very end of my presentation. Here's some resources. There are some, if you go to the KDE website and you just type in Gifted and Talented, it'll bring you to the Gifted Resources page. I've got a twice exceptional PowerPoint and video there that you can watch and share. There are also parent resources as well as educator resources for gifted and talented. The Council for Exceptional Children, CEC, also has a branch called TAG, which is the Association for Gifted. I think they had one of their first annual just TAG conferences this year back in September. Also, when you go to CEC, the national organization, they also have sessions on gifted and talented. The national organization is called the National Association for Gifted Children. There are many resources on their webpage there for twice exceptional, for parents, for educators. The National Research Center on Gifted Education from the University of Connecticut has some really great research on gifted children and some videos that you can watch there. And then also the Davidson Institute is another good resource for all things gifted and for twice exceptional. Next slide, Shasta. So this is my last slide. I just thank you so much for coming. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your input and your feedback and your patience with my technology issues today. I really appreciate that. Please feel free to reach out to me either through giving me a call or sending me an email if you've got any questions after our presentation today. I'm always glad to help, and just really appreciate all that you do for the special ed students and gifted students in your buildings and your districts. I want to wish you the very best of holidays. Please rest, get some relaxation, and rejuvenate for the next half of the school year. Thanks again so much.
Hey, thank you, Kathy. As we kind of switch gears here to our breakout rooms, this is a really good opportunity if anybody has any questions they want to ask Kathy specifically, or any, just kind of feedback you want to share, just thoughts, reactions that you'd like to share with Kathy. This would be a great opportunity to do so. I'm sure some things will come up in our small group in our breakout room. So go ahead. You guys know the drill. Go ahead and take a little snapshot of this so that you have it for your breakout rooms. Of course, you're welcome to have those sort of like natural organic discussions that come up on the topic, but these are some maybe thinking stems to get your conversation started in your breakout rooms. And Kathy, you're getting lots of love over in the chat.
Appreciate that love, people.
Well done, Kathy.
So, whenever you're ready for breakouts, Bill.
I'm getting ready to send everyone to breakout rooms, and no worries if it doesn't work perfectly. We'll do our best to get you in a room, and then we'll bring everyone back around 11:50. So should be getting those assignments here really soon, and we'll see you soon. Let's see, did it work?
Look, we've got several friends moving over.
Friends went into rooms.
Uh-huh.
See, some may pop back out. And then I think a couple folks left. Martha, Marty left, and maybe one other. So, but yeah, looks like everyone's in rooms. So
yeah, it looks like good job, Bill.
Good job, Bill.
And good job, Kathy. Overcome adversity. Yeah.
That's a big deal. Way to fight through it.
I really appreciate y'all's support, and I'm so sorry. If y'all ever ask me to do this again, I will go into the building and I will use the network there.
Quit saying that. It was great. It was a great recovery. Perfect.
Yeah.
We're a good team here. A good team.
It is a good team. And that's exactly what we're modeling, exactly what we would want in a classroom and in a school district. It's like things don't go perfectly.
Yeah, that's right.
And excellence is a process. It's like you focus on doing the best you can with all the resources that you have in the moments that you're given.
Indeed.
Thanks. Really appreciate it. I just really hope people go back after winter break and they look at their students with disabilities differently. If they see a student who doodles or hums or moves their body or is passionate about something, I hope they will refer that student for further evaluation. And
I know there weren't many questions about preschool this time, and I know that preschool, of course, not eligible for evaluation or screening for gifted, but I know Davidson Institute has some resources, right, and others too, on support for emerging giftedness in young children.
yes, it's so important to front load, to give children opportunities to show what they can do, because when they don't have opportunities, then you may not see their gifts or talents,
And those gifts and talents emerge in the early years, and some milestones, they just move right by those milestones quickly, and others maybe not as quickly, and maybe attain even higher milestones associated with older children.
Yeah.
And so what do parents, what do teachers, preschool teachers do in the classroom to support the needs of gifted preschoolers?
Right. And I was fortunate, my parents had the means to provide piano lessons and voice lessons as I went through school. But those, those students who don't have those enrichment opportunities, that's why the Gifted and Talented program should be about the services, Bill. What can we provide those supports to help those children, grow in whatever those gifts and talents are that don't have those supports at home or in their communities.
Yeah, and so often as a special ed, we're so focused on the special ed, we don't think as much about our special ed students potentially having a giftedness.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, I think raising that now with these young leaders will plant that seed moving forward. I didn't think about that when I first took a job as a director. You're dealing with a lot of crises on a regular basis, but
yeah,
I met and worked fairly closely with our GT teacher once I got settled in. So, but I still didn't push it to the degree I think I should have.
Yeah, and I understand that the disability, you really are trying to support that child. But, that's something that Temple Grandin brought up in a national conference I went to, is that, if we look for the positives of that child, it could really help us as we support the disability, as we look at the child's strengths. But I understand. It's really hard to do when you're in the moment,
I went to a district board meeting this week, and they had one of their presentations was something called the Principal Task Force. And I thought about you, Kathy, because it was a really good example of ways to support students with strong leadership skills. And essentially it was like this small group of 4th and 5th graders who they met, I think a couple of times a week, but provided, student-centered solutions to problems. And they helped design like field day. They helped co-create like behavior, strategies. They helped co-create these like videos of like, behavioral expectations. And for certain areas, students could lift up problems to the Principal Task Force, and they would help solve that problem. And it was just I thought it was a really great way to say, here are some age-appropriate leadership skills, in a space for us to support these students with these leadership skills, again, in a way that was meaningful to them. And I just thought it was, again, I thought about you, because I was like, clearly these are kids that have these giftedness, because they were teacher selected, students, and whether any of them had disabilities or not, I don't know that. But I just thought it was a really great way.
Yeah, it is. It's a really good opportunity if a student hasn't been identified, for leadership, for that student to be referred. It's giving them those students an opportunity to show the gifts and talents that they have. And, the follow-up question to that might be, well, if students are already receiving opportunities in leadership, then why identify them? Well, they may have those opportunities there in 4th and 5th grade, but what about 6th through 12th grade? Having been identified for leadership, it should ensure that there are opportunities for the child all the way through school. So just something to think about. Appreciate you saying that, Shasta.
Yeah.
I appreciate your emphasis on equity throughout the presentation too. And getting our emerging leaders thinking about equity, thinking about the data, and evaluating their program through the data, I think is really helpful and important skills to build for emerging leaders.
I thought about putting some data into my presentation, Bill. I was looking yesterday. I think we have about 112 or 114,000 students in the special ed program. But as far as twice exceptional children in the program, students have a disability and are also gifted, there are only about 3,000 students identified. 3,000 out of 112 or 114,000 students. And I just know there are more students out there with gifts and talents that also have a disability.
I would agree.
And it's just like what we're doing here to raise awareness about it,
Mhm.
that will hopefully change that trajectory, right? We'll change that
Yes.
pattern in the data and in the, most importantly, in school systems.
Yes.
I agree, Kathy. I suspect that number would be higher, and that's, one of the things I always think about is, kiddos with like ADHD, and they have those difficulties with executive functioning. I mean, that keeps kiddos out of, I've had students, and again, think about my own kiddo, right, who, shows an aptitude for certain things, but those executive functioning skills, man, I mean, they just keep him from, being, an A student in certain straight A student in certain areas, and so I think about how, as you talked about that collaboration piece and, between like a special ed and GT person, and the importance of collaboration with your gen ed, and it doesn't just happen in 30 minutes a day, right? Or it's just not 30 minutes pulled out here or there, but really thinking about how do we support things, again, like executive functioning skills throughout the day, like, and how often I wonder, if that's addressed appropriately, or even, if teachers know how to like sort of identify and build those executive functioning skills so the students can be more successful, because it's a big hindrance.
I agree. I don't even know if classroom teachers know what executive functioning
Mhm.
skills are.
Right.
That's something I had to look up myself as I was doing this research, and teachers, especially today, are just having to be actors just about in their classes to keep kids engaged. So I feel like, I don't want it to be one more thing, but at the same time, we've got to still be looking for, students and ways to engage students, enrich students, taking that deeper dive. And also for, to be thinking about our 2E students that, our students with disabilities, could they have a gift or a talent?
Kathy, we'll put your slides in SharePoint, as well as, of course, a recording of the presentation. And if there's
Mhm.
anything else that you want us to include or to highlight in SharePoint, yeah, let us know. We can
Okay.
we can pull out some, for example, we can pull out some of those resources and put them on the front page. I think like Becca has a front page running of all of the presentations. So if there are things that you want us to highlight, we can do so there.
Okay. Okay.
I guess it's time. Let me bring folks back, right?
Yep.
So I'm gonna try to see if, okay, here we go. Renee.
I think everybody's tired.
Hello, friends.
Mm-hmm.
Ready? Welcome back to the main session. We'll give just a few more seconds here for everybody to get back in. All right, we'll try cameras again, but if we start bugging out, well, you can flip them back off. Anybody, so out of your small group, out of your breakouts, anything anybody sort of wants to highlight, share, any questions, any, themes that anybody wants to bring up to the whole group? One thing we were sort of talking about in the main room was executive functioning skills. And then I brought that up in the chat earlier, but how often, our kiddos particularly our kiddos with ADHD, how their executive functioning skills so often keep them out of some of these, like, keep them away from straight A's or keep them away from demonstrating their giftedness and things like that, and how it's so important. You know, Kathy talked about that collaboration, between GT, gen ed and special ed leaders, and just thinking about how can we make sure that IEPs appropriately support and address executive functioning skills. How can we make sure our kiddos have the tools they need so that they can be successful in the classroom spaces, and hopefully that will help them demonstrate some of their giftedness in these areas when they have those skills.
And I think in our group, we did discuss that quite a bit. Similar, I mean, when you are identified with any disability or you have anything, the accommodations and related services and all those things need to happen in the regular classroom. And the accommodations specifically, that's no different from when you're gifted and you're deemed gifted, that those like the way they're taught or the way they give information, those accommodations should happen in the regular classroom as well through all the curriculum, not just when they're pulled out for their gifted program once a week or however that looks in your district, but that should be differentiated in the classroom as well. And they should be able, because a lot of our gifted kids think differently and process differently and share their information differently, and that should happen in the classroom as well. I think that's where the disconnect is.
I agree, Carrie. Thank you for sharing that. Alrighty, friends. Well, I will keep us moving ahead. I know that for a lot of us, this is like the last little checkbox before we officially flip over to like holiday break, right? So as sort of a final exit slip here, just make sure that you do your evaluation, your Saturday session evaluation. I know I say this every time, but as somebody who just presented a couple of months ago and got that evaluation back, it is very, very informative. It's very helpful for us as presenters and for us as the leads team to be able to say, okay, what did we do really good on and what worked, but also what can we do better? And that's something that, when we choose presenters, I know Kathy, I know her personally, so I know that she's going to look at this evaluation and say, what do I need to repeat and what can I work with some room for growth? We are definitely in the growth mindset here. So please provide any details, any, information that will help us make sure that we are always working to improve our sessions. But also, if you have some good things to say to Kathy, make sure you say that too, because we always like that too. Is there any questions before we go?
I have a specific question related to my practice that I need maybe an answer to, so I can wait for like everybody else to log in. It's not specific to this, what we talked about today.
Yeah, great, Matthew. And I know somebody else had another question. So if you have questions not specific for Kathy, you're always welcome to hang out here, and the leads team will help you try to get those answers. So you're welcome to hang out if you have something not related to GT. Well, it doesn't look like we have anything. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Just as a reminder, we should be back on regular schedule in January 27th, 2024. What? Who else is old like me and sees 2024 and was like, how did we get here? It's supposed to be like 2014 or something. I don't know. But our next Saturday session will be regular. We got our regular fourth Saturday. So make sure you have that on your calendar. I think the invite's been sent, but double check just in case.
It'll be a great session too. Another great session, Shasta. Dr. Todd Whitney will be joining us, focused on MTSS and PBIS.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bill. And so you guys, if you have some like pre-questions about MTSS, drop those over in the discussion board and we'll collect those and make sure that Dr. Whitney has those so that he can be thinking about incorporating that information into his presentation. So please send us those questions ahead of time so that we can get those to him. And again, I know everybody wants to hear about MTSS, right? Because we have like all the questions about MTSS. So I appreciate that, Bill. Thank you. All right. If there is nothing else, thank you all so much. Have a great weekend. Have a great, a great winter break, holiday break, however you and your family celebrate. I hope it's beautiful and wonderful. Make sure that you take like really good time away from work. Like seriously give yourself permission to do that. Especially I know some of you are already in like dose and assistant dose roles. Do it. Like make it, put it on your to-do list. Give myself, 72 hours completely away from the computer. Take it off of everything and do that. So I hope you guys have a great restful time. And if not, if nothing else, we will see you guys in January.
Have a good one, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Hey, Shasta, just really quick.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I can turn my. I don't know if our Boone County Schools updated, but when I try to get in the chat now, it does not even let me accept you. It says that you are outside our organization, that use caution when chatting or joining, never share. So it won't even let me. So can you